In a bright winter market, a lonely retired Navy SEAL stopped for bread and found a promise waiting in the snow. Beside an old wooden cart stood Mara, a pregnant German shepherd with tired eyes and no safe place left. The homeless man who loved her asked for only $12, not as a price, but as proof of a promise. Caleb thought he was only taking in one frightened dog for the night, but by morning his silent cabin would hold 6 new breaths, an old man's grief, and a town's forgotten shame. Sometimes God does not send healing through thunder, but through a paw print at the door. If this story touches your heart, tell us where you're watching from. And please, like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers and keep these stories alive. By 4 in the afternoon, White Pine Valley had turned the color of old porcelain. Snow fell softly over the winter market, laying itself across canvas roofs, cedar stalls, parked trucks, and the shoulders of strangers who stood too long deciding between jars of honey and knitted socks. The town had dressed itself for comfort. Yellow bulbs hung from wires between the booths. A brass bell rang whenever someone opened the door of Bell's Bakery. Somewhere near the square, a man was selling roasted chestnuts from a steel drum, and the smoke rose blue against the pale Montana sky. Caleb Mercer did not belong to any of it. He moved through the market with the steady, economical stride of a man who had long ago learned not to waste motion. At 52, he still carried the frame of his former life. Tall, broad-shouldered, hard through the chest and arms, though time had carved patience and pain into him where pride used to be. His olive-drab combat shirt fit close beneath a weathered brown canvas jacket, the camouflage sleeves visible at the wrists, striped bands circling the biceps, like faded reminders of a language he no longer spoke aloud. He had come down from his cabin for flour, coffee, canned soup, lamp oil, dog-eared batteries for the radio, and a bottle of pain relievers he pretended were for bad weather and not for the old injury in his shoulder. He intended to buy what he needed and leave. That was how Caleb survived towns. Briefly, politely, without invitation. Crowds tired him in a way mountains never did. A ridgeline did not laugh too loudly. A pine forest did not step behind him without warning. Snow did not ask how he had been or whether he would come to Christmas supper this year. Snow simply fell. Snow kept secrets. He had almost finished his list when Nora Bell leaned over her bakery stall and called, "Mercer, if you leave without bread again, I'm telling the whole town you eat canned beans over the sink like a raccoon with a mortgage." Caleb stopped just long enough to look at her. Nora was round-faced, pink-cheeked from oven heat, and wrapped in a cranberry sweater beneath a flour-dusted apron. Her hair, blonde threaded with silver, had escaped its bun in several directions, as if even her hair refused to obey winter. "I do not have a mortgage," Caleb said. "That is what worries me. No bank to keep you civilized." She shoved a paper-wrapped loaf across the table. "Take it." "I didn't order bread." "Good thing Mercy doesn't wait for paperwork." He placed money on the counter anyway. Nora rolled her eyes but let him, because everyone in White Pine knew Caleb Mercer would rather wrestle a bear than accept a gift in public. He tucked the bread under one arm and turned toward the parking lot. Then he saw the crowd at the far end of the market. Not a large crowd, just enough people gathered in the crooked half-circle that humans make when they smell either trouble or entertainment. Their bodies angled inward. Their voices dipped and rose. Someone laughed, sharp and unpleasant, and that laugh moved through Caleb like cold wire. He should have kept walking. Instead, he turned. At the edge of the square, beside an old wooden handcart with one mismatched wheel, sat an elderly man in a patched gray-brown coat. Snow had collected on the brim of his wool cap and in the seams of his sleeves. His beard was white and uneven. His hands, though shaking from the cold, were large and scarred, the hands of someone who had spent a lifetime arguing with wood and winning. Beside him stood a German shepherd. No, not stood, endured. She was a female, black and tan, heavily pregnant. Her coat had the rich pattern of a shepherd who must once have been beautiful. A dark saddle over her back, golden brown legs, a black muzzle, and a pale, drop-shaped patch of fur on her chest. But the winter had thinned her. Her ribs showed faintly beneath the damp fur. Her belly hung low with coming life. One ear stood alert, the other tilted outward slightly, not broken, just tired. Her eyes were amber, not soft, not pleading, watching. In front of the old man, propped against the cart, was a piece of cardboard with words written in uneven black marker. Need a safe winter home for a pregnant shepherd. Not free. Promise required. $12. A man in a red ski jacket laughed and nudged his friend. $12 for a pregnant shepherd? That's either the worst deal in Montana or the best. Another man crouched too close to the dog and made a clicking noise with his tongue. The shepherd lowered her head a fraction. She did not bark. She did not bare her teeth. But her whole body became a door closing. The old man lifted one hand. "Back up." The man snorted. "Relax, Grandpa. I know dogs." "No," the old man said. "You know prices." That drew a few mutters from the crowd. Caleb stood still. The shepherd's eyes shifted to him. It happened without drama. No music from heaven. No mysterious sign in the snowfall. Just a tired dog looking past a crowd of people who wanted something from her and settling her gaze on a man who wanted nothing at all. Caleb felt the look in his chest. He hated that. He took one step closer. The old man looked up at him. His face was creased deeply, red from cold, and worn with the kind of exhaustion that no nap could mend. But there was dignity in him, stubborn as a fence post in frozen ground. "You interested?" someone behind Caleb joked. "Better hurry. That dog's a whole family pack waiting to happen." The old man's jaw tightened. Caleb did not answer the joke. He looked at the sign. $12, he said. The old man nodded once. "Not for her." Caleb's eyes narrowed. "Then for what?" "For the promise?" The crowd lost interest when no argument broke out. People drifted away in twos and threes, pulled back toward cider, bread, gossip, warmth. Soon there were only a few lingering strangers, Nora watching from her booth, and a deputy standing near the lamppost with her hands tucked into her winter uniform jacket. The old man pushed himself slowly to his feet. "Name Silas Boone." "Caleb Mercer?" "I know." Silas studied him, not with admiration, but with the careful assessment of a craftsman checking whether a beam would hold weight. "You live up beyond Miller's Cut." Caleb said nothing. Silas took the silence as confirmation. "She's Mara? She belonged to my wife before she belonged to me. Maybe that means she never belonged to either of us. My wife used to say dogs are not property. They are witnesses. They see what we become when nobody important is watching." Mara shifted her weight, and the handcart wheel creaked. Caleb glanced at her belly. "How far along?" "Close enough that I'm scared to count days." "Then why bring her here?" Silas flinched, though Caleb had not meant the question cruelly. For a moment, the old man looked past the market, past the lights and stalls, into some private ruin. "Because the storage shed behind Kessler's feed stall gets locked tonight. Storm coming. I've been sleeping there when Wade pretends not to notice." He swallowed. "Shelter won't take dogs. Church basement won't take dogs. County won't make exceptions. Not for a shepherd ready to whelp. I tried 3 rescues. Full. Full. Full." Caleb looked toward the deputy. She had come closer without making a sound. About 40, maybe a little younger, with dark hair tucked beneath a winter cap and a square, steady face. Her badge read, "Cole." "Deputy Marin Cole," she said. Her voice had the practical calm of someone who had seen too many small disasters become large ones because people waited to act. Mr. Boone has been trying. That part is true. And if County takes the dog? Caleb asked. Marin exhaled slowly. Animal control can place her in temporary holding, but the nearest facility with space is 2 counties over. Transport in this weather is not ideal. If she goes into labor during intake, she may be separated from familiar scent and handled by whoever's on shift. Silas looked down at Mara. She doesn't need a cage. She needs a quiet floor and someone who doesn't see babies as inventory. The word inventory sat strangely between them. As if summoned by it, a clean black truck rolled along the curb and stopped near the market gate. A man stepped out wearing a charcoal wool coat and black leather gloves. He had pale hair combed back neatly, polished shoes unsuitable for slush, and the expression of someone who believed every problem could be solved by placing a number beside it. "Silas," the man called. "I heard you were still here." Mara's body stiffened. Silas did not turn. "Evening, Elias." The man smiled at Caleb as he approached. "Elias Voss. I run Voss Shepherds over near Bridger Ridge." His gaze dropped to Mara, quick and measuring, not unkind exactly, worse, detached. "I made Mr. Boone a fair offer this morning. More than fair, considering her condition." "She's not going with you," Silas said. Elias sighed, the way educated men sigh when they want their impatience mistaken for reason. "A pregnant shepherd needs professional care, nutrition plan, whelping space, monitoring. You cannot hand her off to whatever sentimental stranger happens by." Caleb felt the sentence find its mark. Sentimental stranger? He had been called worse in languages Elias would never understand. But this one bothered him because there was enough truth in it to draw blood. Caleb knew nothing about whelping puppies. His cabin was clean but spare. His days were silent by design. He had no business becoming the answer to anyone's prayer, canine or otherwise. Elias turned to him. "You look like a capable man, so be capable. Walk away before pride makes you cruel." Mara made a sound then, not a bark, not a growl, a low breath, almost a rumble deep in her chest. She stepped, slow and heavy, until her body came between Silas and Elias. Her head lowered, her amber eyes fixed forward. She was exhausted, underfed, and carrying unborn life through a snowstorm, yet in that moment she looked less like an animal being sold than a queen guarding the last gate of a fallen kingdom. Caleb's hand tightened around the paper-wrapped bread. He knew that posture, not from dogs alone, from men at the end of long roads, from wounded soldiers who still put themselves between danger and the ones who could not stand, from himself on mornings when he had looked in the mirror and seen nothing left but refusal. Silas touched Mara's neck with 2 fingers. "Easy, girl." The shepherd did not move. Caleb stepped away from Elias and pulled his phone from his pocket. He called the first rescue number Marin gave him, then another. Then Dr. Lila Hart, whose veterinary clinic sat beside the frozen creek at the south end of town. Lila answered on the 4th ring, breathless, with a dog barking somewhere behind her. "Lila Hart." "This is Caleb Mercer." A pause. "That alone tells me something has gone wrong." "I'm at the market. Pregnant shepherd. Underweight? Close to labor. Rescues full?" Her tone changed immediately. "Is this Silas Boone's dog?" "Yes." "I checked her 2 weeks ago in the church parking lot. She needs warmth tonight. Food, but not too much too fast. Quiet. No stress." Lila lowered her voice. "Caleb, if this is about taking her in, don't do it because you feel sorry for her." "I don't." "Good. Pity makes people dramatic for 20 minutes and useless by morning." He almost smiled. "What does she need?" There was another pause, gentler this time. More than a blanket, less than a miracle. Can you follow instructions? Yes? Then maybe she has a chance. When Caleb ended the call, the market seemed quieter. Snow tapped softly against the cardboard sign. Elias Voss watched him with faint irritation, already understanding the shape of the decision before Caleb spoke it. Caleb looked at Silas. I can take her tonight. Temporary, if that's what you want. Dr. Hart can come out when the roads allow it. Silas searched his face. Temporary is a word people use when their heart wants a back door. Caleb did not deny it. I don't know dogs like this, he said. Not pregnant ones. I don't know puppies. I don't know if I'll be good at it. Silas's expression shifted, almost into a smile. Good. Men who think they're naturally good at caring usually make a mess and call it confidence. Nora, from her booth, muttered loudly, Put that on a pillow. No one laughed much, but the air loosened. Silas bent slowly and picked up the old leather leash attached to Mara's collar. A small metal tag hung from it, scratched and nearly illegible. The letter M remained, faint as moonlight under ice. He held the leash out. Caleb did not take it at once. In that small hesitation lived a whole battlefield. The cabin waiting empty on the mountain, the clean floor that would soon be dirty, the nights he would not sleep, the creatures that would need him before sunrise, the old fear that anything he cared for would someday look back at him from the far side of loss. Mara took one step forward. Her nose touched the back of Caleb's gloved hand. It was not affection, not yet. It was investigation. A question asked in scent and breath. Who are you when no one important is watching? Caleb closed his fingers around the leash. Silas did not let go. Don't take her because she looks sad, the old man said. His voice had roughened. Sadness melts fast when the floor gets ruined and the vet bills come. Don't take her because you want to feel like a good man. That feeling is cheaper than $12. Caleb looked at him. Then why should I take her? Silas's eyes shone, though whether from cold or grief Caleb could not tell. Because she still believes the world might make room for what's coming, and I don't have a room left to give her. For a moment, the whole market seemed to hold its breath. The lights glowed warmer. The snow thickened. Somewhere behind them, Nora's bell rang as a customer entered the bakery. Ordinary life went on, rude and holy at the same time. Caleb reached into his wallet and pulled out a 10 and 2 ones. The bills looked absurd in his hand. Too small. Too thin. A child's ransom for a kingdom of unborn hearts. He placed them in Silas's palm. Silas folded Caleb's fingers over the leash. Don't receive her with pity, he whispered. Pity is snow on a glove. Pretty for a second, gone the moment warmth touches it. Receive her only if you still have enough strength to keep your word. Caleb looked down at Mara. The shepherd leaned against Silas one last time. The old man pressed his weathered hand to her head, closing his eyes as if memorizing the shape of her skull beneath his palm. Then he stepped back. Mara did not follow him. She stood beside Caleb in the falling snow, heavy with life, wary of the world, and silent as a vow. Caleb held the leash gently, not pulling. $12 had changed hands. It should have felt like nothing. Instead, as the winter market blurred gold and white around him, Caleb felt the weight of that old leather strap travel up his arm, settle across his shoulders, and become heavier than any weapon he had ever carried. The road to Caleb Mercer's cabin climbed out of White Pine Valley like a scar through the pines. By the time his truck left the last row of town lights behind, the winter market had become only a golden blur in the rearview mirror. The laughter, the smell of bread, the sting of Elias Voss's polite contempt, and Silas Boone's weathered hand, folding around $12, all fell away beneath the steady whisper of tires over snow. Mara lay across the back seat on a wool blanket Nora Bell had thrown into Caleb's arms before he could object. "She's pregnant, not luggage," Nora had said, pushing a second bundle through the open truck door. "And that's not charity. That's old towels. Nobody has pride about towels." Caleb had not known what to say to that. Now the towels sat beside Mara, along with a paper bag of bread, a tin of ginger cookies, and the strange new weight of a promise no larger than a leather leash. Mara did not sleep during the drive. She watched Caleb through the gap between the seats. One ear stood upright. The other, the tired one, tilted outward whenever the truck hit a rough patch in the road. Her amber eyes caught pieces of passing light, then vanished again as the forest thickened around them. Caleb kept both hands on the wheel. "You don't have to like me," he said finally. Mara blinked once. "That's fine. I've been not liked by professionals." The dog gave no sign that she appreciated humor, which made her fit the cabin already. Snow gathered in the headlights. The truck wound upward past fence posts capped in white, past frozen drainage ditches and black spruce trees bending under their own burden. Caleb could feel the old ache in his right shoulder beginning to throb from the cold. He ignored it the way he ignored most messages from his body. With discipline, resentment, and 2 pills he would take later while pretending he had not planned to. The cabin appeared at the end of the track, squat and dark against the trees. It was well built. Caleb had made sure of that. The roof held, the windows sealed, the chimney drew clean. There was firewood stacked under the side awning in even rows, each split log placed with the grave order of ammunition. A man could survive a hard winter there. Survive. That had been the word, not live. The porch creaked under his boots as he unlocked the front door. Warm air from the bank stove moved against his face, dry and faintly smoky. He stepped inside, turned on the lamp, and saw the room as Mara would see it. 1 table, 1 chair, 1 narrow bed visible through the half-open bedroom door, a locked gun cabinet, a cast-iron stove, a neat shelf of canned goods. No photographs, no extra mugs drying by the sink, no flowers pressed in books, no ridiculous holiday ornament, no evidence that anyone had ever visited and stayed long enough to leave a mark. Caleb stood there with the leash in his hand, suddenly embarrassed by the cleanliness. It was not the clean of welcome. It was the clean of retreat. Mara remained on the porch. Caleb turned back. "Come on." She looked past him into the cabin, nose working, body heavy and cautious. Snow touched the dark saddle of her back. Her belly hung low beneath her, full of unborn weight. She did not pull away, but she did not step forward either. Caleb crouched slowly, keeping his bad shoulder angled away, making himself smaller without knowing exactly why. "No cages," he said. "No tricks." Mara's eyes moved from his face to the doorway, then to the stove glow beyond him. At last she crossed the threshold. It was not a grand entrance. Her nails clicked once on the wood floor. Then she stopped immediately, as if expecting the house to change its mind. Caleb closed the door behind her. The cabin seemed to listen. He laid one of Nora's towels near the stove. Mara ignored it and chose the corner where she could see both the door and the window. She lowered herself with difficulty, breathing through the discomfort of her belly, then folded her front paws with careful dignity. Her gaze never left him. "Your call," Caleb said. He removed his jacket, hung it by the door, then stood awkwardly in the middle of his own home. His olive drab combat shirt felt suddenly too severe for the room, the camouflage sleeves and faded bicep bands, speaking of a life that had prepared him for danger, but not for this. A pregnant dog occupying the corner with the quiet authority of a displaced queen. He filled a bowl with water and set it a few feet from her. Mara waited until he stepped back before drinking. Not much, just enough. Then she returned to watching. Caleb checked his phone. One missed text from Deputy Marin Cole. "Roads worsening. Dr. Hart heading your way now. Keep dog calm. Don't overfeed." He looked at the dog. The dog looked at him. "Calm," he muttered. "Right." He had faced rooms where every shadow might have held a rifle. He had crossed black water with ice in his teeth. He had once gone 36 hours without sleep because sleep would have meant failing men who trusted him. But he had no idea how to look calm for a German shepherd who had every reason to doubt the species. So he did the only thing that made sense. He worked. He moved without rushing. He cleared a space near the stove, then reconsidered because it was too exposed. He dragged an old trunk away from the wall, opened a folded canvas tarp, laid towels over it, and placed a second blanket nearby. He found a shallow box that had once held kindling and lined it with more cloth, though he knew at once it was too small for what was coming. Mara watched each motion as if recording evidence. Caleb took a pencil from the drawer and wrote on the small slate board by the pantry. "Mara small meals, water call, Leela, no sudden movement. Do not be stupid." He stared at the last line for a second, then underlined it. The knock came 40 minutes later. Mara rose before Caleb reached the door. Not fully, just enough to brace her front legs and lower her head. A small rumble gathered in her chest. Caleb held up a hand without touching her. "Easy." The knock came again, brisk but not impatient. "Caleb, it's Lila Hart. If you're dead, I'm taking back every decent thing I ever thought about you." He opened the door. Dr. Lila Hart stepped inside with a gust of snow, carrying a dark medical bag in one hand and a plastic crate in the other. She was in her early 40s, her brown hair tied low under a knit cap, cheeks red from the cold. There was nothing fragile in the way she entered a room. Lila had the calm of someone who could kneel in blood, mud, or birth fluid and still remember where she put the thermometer. Her eyes went first to Mara, not to Caleb, not to the cabin, to the patient. "Hello, sweetheart," Lila said softly, already lowering her body angle, already turning slightly sideways instead of facing Mara head-on. "I know, new house, new man, new smells, very rude of the universe." Mara did not growl louder, but she did not relax. Lila glanced at Caleb. "Has she eaten?" "No." "Good. Has she had water?" "A little." "Also good. Has she bitten you?" "No." "Disappointing. I had money on yes." Caleb gave her a flat look. Lila smiled briefly, then opened her bag. "I'm going to examine her only as much as she allows. If she says no, we listen. Pregnant mothers outrank everyone." For the next 20 minutes, the cabin changed shape around Lila's presence. She did not fill the silence with pity or chatter. She asked practical questions. When did Mara last eat? How far had she walked? Did Silas mention previous litters? Any discharge? Any signs of contractions? Had Caleb noticed vomiting, tremors, labored breathing? Caleb answered what he could. Mostly the answer was no. Mostly the answer was, "I don't know." Each time he felt the inadequacy of it. A man could be decorated for precision in one life and still stand useless in another. Lila did not shame him for it. She let Mara sniff the back of her hand. She waited. She offered a small piece of soft food from her palm. Mara ignored the food, but sniffed Lila's sleeve. At length, the shepherd allowed 2 fingers against her neck, then a touch along her side. When Lila tried to move closer to the belly, Mara's head turned sharply. Lila stopped immediately. "Fair enough," she said. "Your body, your rules." Something about that sentence made Caleb look away. He busied himself by putting another log in the stove. Lila noticed anyway. Doctors did. Vets too, apparently. "She's underweight," Lila said after a while. "Not dangerously far gone, but enough that we need to be careful. Too much rich food too quickly could hurt her. Small meals. Warm, quiet environment, clean bedding, minimal stress." Caleb nodded. "She may deliver within days, maybe sooner if stress pushes her body. I'll give you supplies and a list." "I can follow a list." I suspected. You look like a man who would alphabetize canned soup if left unsupervised. It's by expiration date. Lila looked at him. He looked back. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed. The sound startled Mara. The dog lifted her head, but the laugh did not carry cruelty, so she settled again, still wary. Lila took in the room more fully then. The single chair, the bare wall above the stove, the bed made tight enough to bounce a quarter off, the absence of anything unnecessary or tender. "Caleb," she said, quieter, "this house is ready for a siege." "It's winter?" "No, this is different." He did not answer. She did not push. Instead, she set the plastic crate on the table and began removing items. Cans of recovery food, vitamin supplements, disposable pads, a thermometer, clean gauze, a bottle of mild antiseptic, gloves, a small heating pad, and a folded sheet of handwritten instructions. When she chooses a place to nest, don't keep moving her because you think you found a better tactical position. I wouldn't call it that. You absolutely would. He took the instruction sheet. There were more words on it than he expected, more ways to fail. Watch for prolonged straining. Watch for green discharge before first pup. Call if more than 2 hours between puppies with active contractions. Keep the area warm, not hot. Do not pull unless instructed. Keep mother calm. Caleb read the list twice. Lila watched him read it, and for the first time her expression softened in a way that had nothing to do with medicine. "You don't have to already know how to do this," she said. His jaw tightened. "I took responsibility." "Yes, that means learning, not pretending." Mara shifted in the corner, gave a small huff, and lowered her head onto her paws. The stove clicked. Outside, the wind moved through the trees like a long animal brushing past the walls. Caleb folded the list carefully and placed it on the table under his old walnut-handled knife, the one engraved with the words, "Hold fast." Lila saw the knife, the way he used it not as a weapon, but as a paperweight, a tool, a small anchor from another life. "Good motto," she said. "Old habit. Keep this one." Before she left, Lila showed him how to mix the food, how much to give, where to place water, how to watch without hovering. Caleb followed every instruction with such grave focus that Lila finally said, "You know, she's having puppies, not defusing a bomb." Caleb glanced at Mara. Mara stared back with solemn amber eyes. "Feels debatable," he said. This time, Lila did not laugh loudly. She only smiled. At the door, she paused. "Nora said she's bringing more towels." "No." "That wasn't a question. Also, she made pie." "No." "She also said refusing pie during a snowstorm is how ghosts get invited into houses." Caleb closed his eyes briefly. "Why do people in this town threaten kindness like it's a legal notice?" "Because asking nicely doesn't work on you." After Lila left, the cabin felt larger and less obedient than before. Supplies covered the table. A second water bowl sat near the stove. The list of instructions waited under the knife. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic, wet fur, wood smoke, and something Caleb could not name because it had been too long since his home contained need. He prepared Mara's first small meal exactly as instructed. She did not eat while he watched, so he turned his back and washed the already clean spoon. Behind him there was silence. Then the soft sound of eating. Caleb did not turn around. For some reason, the small wet sound of her tongue against the bowl tightened his throat more than Silas's words had. A living creature had entered his house and decided, cautiously, to continue living there for another hour. It felt like being trusted with a match in a cave. Nora arrived just before dark with a basket of towels, a wrapped apple pie, and a face that dared Caleb to object. She took one step inside, saw Mara in the corner, and immediately lowered her voice. "Oh," Nora whispered. "She's a beauty?" Mara watched her but did not rise. Nora set the basket on the floor instead of the table, as if even the towels should approach with manners. "I won't stay," she said. "I just brought things." "You brought half your bakery." "Don't exaggerate. The other half is still judging me." She looked around the cabin, and unlike Lila, she did not hide her reaction quickly enough. Her eyes moved over the bare walls, the single chair, the absence of another life. "Well," Nora said, forcing brightness back into her voice, "at least now there'll be someone here with better conversation skills." Caleb took the basket. "She doesn't talk." "Exactly." He almost smiled. It was small, barely there. But Nora saw it, and by the way her face lit, Caleb suspected she might try to put up a plaque commemorating the event. After Nora left, night settled over the cabin. Not the empty night Caleb knew, but a crowded one. The kind filled with soft breathing, small shifts of weight, the occasional click of nails against the floor. He brought in more wood. He checked the stove. He reread Lila's list. He moved the water bowl 2 inches, then moved it back because he realized he was becoming ridiculous. Mara watched him until the fire burned low. At some point, Caleb sat on the floor with his back against the wall, far enough not to crowd her, close enough to be useful. His shoulder ached, his knees complained. The house creaked in the wind. "You picked a bad inn," he told her quietly. Mara blinked. "No service. Cook's inexperienced. Owner's got a personality problem." Her tired ear tilted outward. He looked down at his boots, old leather darkened by melted snow. For years they had stood alone by doors, under beds, beside stoves. Always ready to leave, never expected to stay for anyone. Then Mara rose. Slowly, with effort, she pushed herself up and crossed the few feet between them. Caleb went still. He did not reach for her. He barely breathed. Mara lowered her head. Her muzzle touched one boot. Then she folded herself down, not against him, not quite, but close enough that her breath warmed the leather. It was not love. It was not forgiveness. It was not trust, not fully. It was a treaty signed in the language of exhausted creatures. Caleb stared at her for a long time. Outside, snow thickened over the roof and softened the world beyond the windows. Inside, the stove breathed orange light across the floorboards. The cabin, once kept as orderly and loveless as a bunker, had acquired a second heartbeat. Caleb reached slowly for Lila's instruction sheet and added one more line at the bottom. "Do not make her regret this." Then he sat beside Mara until the night deepened, listening to her breathe, and understood with a fear he could not name that morning was no longer something that simply arrived. Now morning was something waiting for them both. By the second morning, the town already knew. White Pine Valley had a way of carrying news through snow faster than trucks could manage on salted roads. It moved from bakery counters to feed stalls, from the post office line to the gas station coffee machine, from Nora Bell's flour-covered hands to half the valley before noon. Caleb Mercer had taken Silas Boone's pregnant shepherd up to his cabin. Some people said it kindly. Some people said it the way they might mention a roof beginning to sag. Caleb learned this because things began appearing on his porch. A sack of old towels, a half-used bag of senior dog food that Lila later rejected with a stern text. 2 wool blankets, one smelling faintly of cedar, a cardboard box containing newspapers, a chipped water bowl, and a note that read, "For the pups, if there are pups. No need to return." Caleb stood over the offerings with his coffee cooling in one hand and the expression of a man who had accidentally become a public project. Mara watched from inside the doorway. She had not softened exactly. She was still careful with every movement, still choosing the corner near the stove, but turning herself so she could see the front door. Yet she no longer rose every time Caleb crossed the room. When he prepared her small meals, she waited until he stepped away, then ate. When he brought in firewood, she tracked his boots, but did not rumble. Progress, Lila had called it over the phone. Caleb thought progress looked a lot like being tolerated. Still, the cabin had changed. Not beautifully, not yet. It looked like a supply depot had collided with a laundry room. Towels were stacked near the stove. Lila's list sat under Caleb's walnut-handled knife on the table. A thermometer, gloves, pads, cans of recovery food, and folded blankets occupied spaces where dust used to rest in peace. Caleb had lived for years with everything in its place. Now everything had a reason. That was more unsettling. Late that morning, a truck came up the track. Mara heard it before Caleb did. Her head lifted, her tired right ear angled outward. Her body tightened, not in panic, but in calculation. Caleb moved to the window. A county vehicle stopped near the porch. A man stepped out first, broad through the middle, wearing a navy parka and a cap with the White Pine Winter Market logo stitched across the front. A giant ring of keys swung at his belt, jangling with each step like a warning bell. Wade Kessler. Behind him came Deputy Marin Cole, moving with the measured patience of someone who had agreed to supervise a conversation before it became a complaint. Her winter uniform was zipped to the throat, her dark hair tucked under a cap, and her eyes already looked tired of men preparing to be difficult. Caleb opened the door before Wade could knock. Wade lifted one gloved hand. "Morning, Mercer." "Wade?" Marin nodded. "Caleb?" Mara did not bark, but she rose halfway. Marin saw the dog immediately and lowered her voice. "We'll stay by the door." Wade peered past Caleb into the cabin. "So it's true." Caleb did not move aside. "Depends what version you heard." "That you took Boone's dog." "I took Mara." Wade's mouth tightened. He was not a cruel-looking man. He had the red face of someone who spent winters arguing with frozen locks and summers arguing with vendors. His mustache was trimmed too neatly for his mood. He looked like a man who had spent decades keeping small things from becoming everybody's problem and had begun to mistake that for wisdom. "I need to talk about Silas," Wade said. Caleb stepped onto the porch and pulled the door mostly shut behind him, leaving enough gap that Mara could see him. He did not like the idea of men crowding her. Wade noticed. "I'm not here to take the dog." "Good. But you should know what you stepped into." Marin's eyes shifted toward Wade. "Careful." Wade sighed. The keys at his belt clinked as he shifted his weight. "Silas has been sleeping behind the market on and off for weeks. I let it slide longer than I should have. Couple vendors complained. Missing rags, stove ash spilled near the back door. He left wood shavings everywhere. Insurance people would skin me if they knew." "He stole from them?" Caleb asked. "No." Wade looked annoyed that the answer did not help his case. "Not stole, borrowed maybe, used things, fixed a broken hinge on Nora's stall without asking, repaired a split crate at Danner's produce stand. Left little carved animals on the window ledges like that made it even." "It did," Marin said. Wade shot her a look. She met it calmly. Caleb leaned against the porch post. The cold bit through his shirt where the jacket hung open. "So why are you here?" "Because Silas is gone. Because people are asking questions. Because that dog was sitting in my market with a price sign, and if something goes wrong, folks will ask why I didn't report it sooner." Marin's voice stayed even. "There's also the matter of paperwork. I'm not making trouble. I want to prevent it." Caleb looked through the gap in the door. Mara stood in the warm shadow of the cabin, amber eyes fixed on him. Her pale chest marking caught the stove light like a small flame. "What paperwork?" Marin pulled a folded form from inside her jacket. A temporary care agreement. Silas signed a basic statement yesterday before he left the market. It says he willingly placed Mara in your care. Lila can confirm medical need. I'll witness it. This protects you if someone claims you took the dog improperly. Someone like who? The answer came before Marin could speak. A second vehicle climbed the road. This one was too clean for the weather. Black truck, polished grill, tires that had seen slush but not humility. Wade muttered something under his breath. Marin's jaw tightened. Caleb watched the truck stop beside the county vehicle. Elias Voss stepped out wearing a charcoal wool coat, black gloves, and boots that seemed personally offended by mud. Snow touched his pale hair and melted without disturbing it. He carried a slim black leather folder beneath one arm. Even the folder looked expensive. "Mr. Mercer," Elias called, pleasant as a knife set carefully on a table. "Good, everyone is here." "No one invited you," Caleb said. Elias smiled. "Concern often arrives without invitation." Mara growled from inside the cabin. It was low, not loud, but every person on the porch heard it. Elias glanced toward the door. "She sounds stressed?" "She sounds accurate," Marin said. Wade coughed into his glove, perhaps to hide a laugh. Elias ignored it. He stepped closer but stopped when Caleb's posture changed. It was not dramatic. Caleb simply became still. Men like Elias might not recognize old combat habits, but they could recognize a closed gate. "I'll be brief," Elias said. "I am prepared to offer $3,000 for the dog today." Wade's eyebrows rose despite himself. Caleb said nothing. Elias opened his folder and removed a paper. "I own a licensed facility, heated whelping room, veterinary partnerships, staff, monitoring equipment. You have," he glanced toward the cabin, "a private residence, no experience with whelping, and if I may say, a rather isolated location during a winter storm pattern." Every word was polished. Every word had weight. That was the worst part. Caleb could have dismissed cruelty. He knew what to do with arrogance, but Elias did not sound ridiculous. He sounded prepared. He sounded like a man who had thought beyond feeling. And Caleb, standing on a snowy porch with one chair in his cabin and dog supplies he had learned about yesterday, felt the blade enter quietly. Elias must have seen it. "This is not an insult," he continued. "It is an adult assessment of risk. Sentiment has its place. So does competence." Mara shifted inside the doorway. The floor creaked beneath her paws. Caleb heard Lila's voice in his memory. Taking responsibility means learning, not pretending. Elias extended the paper. "Sell her to me. I'll even allow Mr. Boone visitation if he reappears and behaves reasonably." At that, something in Caleb's expression altered. Not anger first. Disgust. "Allow," Caleb repeated. Elias tilted his head. "A legal owner allows access. That is how ownership works." From inside the cabin came a soft thud. Caleb turned. Mara had moved forward despite the strain of her belly. She stood in the doorway now, not fully outside, not hidden within. Her body made a line across the threshold. Her head was low. Her amber eyes were fixed not on Elias's face, but on the folder in his hand, as if the paper itself smelled wrong. Wade took a small step back. Marin did not move, but Caleb saw her hand hover near the latch of the door, ready to close it if needed. Elias looked at Mara the way a buyer might look at a valuable thing with a scratch on it. "She's reactive. That will complicate delivery." Mara's growl deepened. Caleb did not reach for her. He did not command her. He only stepped beside her, close enough that she could feel him without being crowded. And in that moment, Caleb understood something with uncomfortable clarity. Mara did not need him to be impressive. She did not care about his past, his rank, his training, the stories other men told in bars when they wanted war to sound cleaner than it was. She did not need a hero on a porch. She needed a man who would not hand her over because someone better dressed had made fear sound responsible. Caleb looked at the paper in Elias's hand. No? Elias's smile thinned. You haven't read the offer. I heard enough. $3,000 is generous. No. You may feel differently when the first emergency bill comes. Caleb felt that one land. He thought of his savings, the truck that needed work, the roof patch he had been postponing until spring, the cost of heat, the cost of Lila's visits, the cost of lives not yet born and already depending on him. His refusal did not become easier. It became more honest. Marin unfolded her form and placed it against a clipboard. Mr. Mercer is not obligated to entertain purchase offers. Silas Boone's statement is valid for temporary care, pending follow-up. Dr. Hart's note supports medical need. Unless you have a legal claim to the dog, Mr. Voss, this conversation is finished. Elias's eyes moved to her. Deputy Cole, surely you understand that good intentions can become neglect. I do, Marin said. That's why I'm here documenting care. She handed the clipboard to Caleb. He signed. His name looked strange beneath the words temporary caregiver. Too simple for what it meant, too official for something that had begun with a cardboard sign in falling snow. Marin signed beneath him. Then Wade, after a reluctant pause, signed as witness to the transfer from the market premises. He made a face while doing it, as if compassion gave him indigestion. There, Marin said. Elias closed his folder slowly. For the first time, the smoothness left his face for half a second. Not rage. Calculation interrupted. Then it returned. You're making an emotional decision, he said to Caleb. Yes, Caleb answered. That surprised everyone, including himself, but he did not stop. I'm also making a practical one. She's warm. She's eating. A vet has seen her. A deputy has the papers. And she's not yours. Snow slid from the porch roof in a soft rush. Elias looked from Caleb to Mara, then to the closed folder in his hand. Kindness doesn't pay veterinary bills, Mr. Mercer. No, Caleb said, but neither does owning something make you worthy of it. The silence afterward was not triumphant. It was cold, awkward, and very real. Elias stepped back. I hope your confidence survives the night. He returned to his truck, leaving no threat behind, except the kind that men like him preferred. Doubt, neatly folded, and placed in another man's mind. Wade watched the black truck reverse down the snowy track. He's not wrong about bills. Marin gave him a look. What? Wade said. He's not. I didn't say I liked him. Caleb remained beside Mara. Her breathing had quickened from the stress. He felt, rather than saw, the tremble in her front legs. The conversation had cost her. That angered him more than Elias had. He opened the door wider and stepped back. Inside. Mara looked up at him. For a second she did not move. Then she turned and went back toward the stove. Not because he had ordered her, because the warm place was still there. Marin stayed long enough to make copies of the form with her phone and send one to Caleb, one to Lila, and one to the county office. Wade lingered by the porch, staring toward the road where Elias had disappeared. You know, Wade said, Silas wasn't always like this. Caleb waited. He built half the market stalls, years ago, before his wife got sick, before the house went. Wade's voice lost some of its irritation. Man could fix anything made of wood. Wouldn't take payment half the time. Drove me crazy. Generosity often does, Marin said dryly. Wade ignored her, but less forcefully than before. I just don't want trouble. Caleb looked at the cabin door, at Mara's shadow moving near the stove. Trouble came with a folder, he said. Not the dog. Wade's keys clinked as he shifted. Maybe. It was not agreement, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall. After they left, the day grew quiet again. Caleb carried the signed paper inside and set it on the table beside Lila's instructions. The cabin had become a strange little office of impossible responsibilities: medical notes, care agreement, feeding schedule, receipt from the market, and Nora's pie cooling in its foil tin. Mara had lowered herself near the stove, but she was not resting. Her eyes remained open. Stress had pulled her inward again. Caleb prepared her next small meal. This time, when he set it down and stepped away, she did not eat. He waited. Nothing. He took another step back. Still nothing. At last, Caleb sat on the floor with his back against the kitchen cabinet, far from the bowl and facing slightly away. "I know," he said quietly. He sounded reasonable. Mara's ear moved. "That's the dangerous kind." The stove clicked. Wind brushed snow against the windows. From somewhere under the table came the faint ticking of Caleb's old wall clock, a sound he rarely noticed because there had never been another heartbeat in the room to measure it against. He pulled out his wallet. Inside, behind his license and a folded emergency 20, was the small receipt Nora had insisted on writing at the market as a joke. "Mara, $12, promise required." The handwriting slanted upward, ridiculous and brave. Caleb stared at it for a long time. Then he took the receipt and slid it under the edge of Lila's instruction sheet beside the care agreement, where it could not be misplaced. Paper, paper, paper. None of it could love a dog, none of it could warm a newborn, but all of it said the same thing in different languages. Stay. Do the work. Do not vanish when the cost appears. Mara rose slowly and approached the bowl. She sniffed once, looked toward Caleb, then began to eat. He did not move. Only after she finished did she come to him, stopping just beyond arm's reach. Her tired right ear angled outward. The pale patch on her chest caught the firelight. Caleb lowered his gaze, giving her the choice. Mara stepped close enough to press her muzzle briefly against his wrist. A touch, then gone. She returned to the stove as if nothing had happened. Caleb sat there with his hand resting on his knee, feeling the place where her breath had warmed his skin. Elias's words remained in the room. Bills, risk, inexperience, failure. They did not disappear, but they changed shape. They no longer sounded like reasons to surrender Mara. They sounded like the first true measurements of the promise Caleb had made. That night, before banking the fire, he added a new line beneath the feeding schedule on the slate board. Call Lila. Ask cost. Plan for it. He stared at the words, then wrote another line under that. No back door. The cabin was still small. The storm was still coming. Caleb was still a man with one chair, an aching shoulder, and more fear than he cared to admit. But Mara slept near the stove, and the leash Silas had placed in Caleb's hand hung by the door, no longer a symbol of ownership, a reminder of what must not be abandoned. By nightfall, White Pine Valley had disappeared. The storm did not arrive like weather. It arrived like an army without flags, pressing down from the ridges, swallowing the road, the fence posts, the dark trunks of the pines, and finally the porch steps of Caleb Mercer's cabin. Snow struck the windows in hard, white gusts. The trees leaned and groaned as if some old winter god had put his hands on their shoulders and demanded they kneel. Inside, the cabin held its small circle of light. The stove burned low and steady. Towels warmed on a chair near the fire. Lila's instruction sheet lay on the table beneath Caleb's walnut-handled knife. Beside it sat the temporary care agreement, the $12 receipt, and a pencil sharpened to a precise point. Caleb had checked the road twice before dark. By the third time, there was no road left to check. Only whiteness. Mara knew before he did. She had been restless since late afternoon, rising and lowering herself, turning in slow, uncomfortable circles near the nest Caleb had made beside the stove. She refused most of her food. Her breathing changed first, deeper, uneven, as if each breath had to travel around some great unseen stone inside her. Caleb noticed because he had started noticing everything: the angle of her ears, the rhythm of her paws against the floor, the way her amber eyes moved toward him, then away, then back again. At 8:17 p.m., Mara gave a low, strained whine. Caleb looked at the clock, then at the instruction sheet, then at Mara. "No," he said quietly, as if the storm, the dog, and fate itself could be reasoned with. "Not tonight." Mara's only answer was another breath, long and trembling. Caleb called Lila. She answered immediately. "Tell me." Restless, refused food, breathing changed, one low whine. "No visible discharge yet." "Contractions?" "I don't know." "You'll know soon." In the background, Caleb heard wind against glass, then a muffled bark from somewhere in Lila's clinic. Her voice remained calm. "I can't get up Miller's Cut. Marin called. Plows pulled off the upper road until the wind drops." Caleb closed his eyes for half a second. "All right," he said. "Caleb." He opened them. "You can do this if you listen, not if you improvise heroics. Listen to me. Listen to Mara, and don't panic just because birth looks less orderly than a checklist." "I don't panic." "You get very quiet. It's your version." He looked at Mara. She had lowered herself onto the towels, but her front paws needed the cloth. Her tired right ear tilted outward. "Tell me what to do." So Lila did. She guided him through the first preparations again, slowly enough that each instruction became a plank under his feet. Clean towels within reach. Warm water, not hot. Gloves ready. Heating pad under one layer of cloth, never directly against the pups. Phone charged, flashlight nearby in case power failed. Note the time of strong contractions. Do not pull unless instructed. Do not crowd the mother. Deputy Marin Cole texted 5 minutes later. Upper road closed. I'm monitoring. Call if human emergency. Otherwise stay put. Nora Bell sent a message a minute after that. I have soup, coffee, pie, and opinions ready when roads open. Tell Mara she is already doing better than most men at the market. Caleb stared at the messages longer than necessary. For years, his emergencies had belonged to him alone. Pain in the shoulder, nightmares, frozen pipes, a truck stuck in spring mud. He handled them because handling things alone had become a kind of religion. Now, in the worst of the storm, people were gathered around the edges of his life, like lanterns. Too far away to touch, close enough to matter. Mara cried out. The sound cut clean through him, not because it was loud. It was not. It was small, strained, animal, and honest. But somewhere in Caleb's body, older sounds woke and reached for it. A radio crackling under fire, a young man calling for a medic, wind over sand, the terrible pause between a request for help and the answer that came too late. His hand tightened around the phone. For 1 second, the cabin thinned. The stove became a flare of orange and dust. The snow at the windows became smoke. The floor beneath him seemed to tilt. Mara turned her head sharply. She saw something change in him. Caleb did not know how. Perhaps dogs read ghosts by scent. Perhaps pain had its own posture. She pushed herself up with effort and reached for him. Not with her teeth bared, not in fear. She caught the cuff of his sleeve gently between her teeth and tugged once. A small, tired pull. Enough. Caleb came back. He looked down at her, at the dark muzzle, the pale drop of fur on her chest, the amber eyes that did not beg him to be brave. They only required him to be present. "Right," he whispered. His voice was rough. "I'm here." Lila was still speaking through the phone. "Caleb, talk to me." "I'm here." he repeated, this time to both of them. After that, the night narrowed to work, not battle, not rescue. Work. Caleb washed his hands again, though they were already clean. He set the phone on speaker and placed it high enough that Mara would not knock it aside. He moved slowly, always telling Mara what he was doing before he did it, though he had no idea whether the words mattered. Maybe the tone did, maybe the rhythm did. Maybe saying things out loud kept his own mind from slipping backward. Clean towel. He laid one down. Water. He checked the bowl. Heat. He touched the cloth above the pad. Time. He wrote on the slate board, 9:04, strong contractions. Mara panted, strained, rested, strained again. Each wave took hold of her body and moved through it like a command older than language. Caleb knelt near her shoulder, not behind her unless Lila instructed it, one hand resting on the floor where Mara could see it. He wanted to do more. That was the hardest part. War had taught him to act. This asked him to wait. Good girl, he said, low and steady. Stay with me. One breath, then the next. The first puppy came at 9:41, small, dark, slick with birth, folded into the world like a secret. Caleb's breath stopped. Lila's voice cut in. Let Mara work if she's working. Mara turned immediately, instinct taking over where trust had not yet fully grown. She cleaned the pup with urgent, rough tenderness. Caleb watched, awe and terror braided together in his chest. Then came the smallest sound, a thin squeak, a thread of life. Caleb wrote the time with a hand that was not as steady as he wanted. 9:41. Pup 1 breathing. The second came faster. Then a long pause. The storm struck the cabin harder around midnight. The lights flickered twice. Caleb had the flashlight in his hand before the second flicker finished. The power held. He thanked no one in particular and everyone at once. Mara grew tired after the third. Her head sank lower between contractions. Her eyes half closed, then opened again as if she refused to leave her post. Caleb offered water. She drank a little from the bowl he held near her mouth, and for once she did not wait for him to step away. That small permission struck him more deeply than he expected. Not trust as a grand gift, trust as thirst accepted from another hand. At 12:36, the fourth puppy arrived too quiet. Caleb knew before Lila said anything. The pup did not squeak, did not move with the same fierce, clumsy insistence as the others. Mara licked it, nudged it, then looked at Caleb. That look nearly undid him. It was not human, but it was a question. Caleb heard Lila's voice from the phone, sharp now, precise. Caleb, listen, clear the membrane if needed. Rub gently but firmly with a warm towel. Keep the head angled down slightly. Don't shake, just stimulate. Talk to me. He did exactly what she said. Nothing. The storm roared. The stove clicked. Mara whined once, low and breaking. Caleb rubbed the tiny body between warm towels, careful, steady, terrified of too much pressure, terrified of too little. His world reduced to the small shape in his hands. Come on, he whispered. He was not speaking like a soldier now, not like a commander. He spoke like a man standing at the smallest gate he had ever guarded. Come on, little one, not all this way just to quit at the door. Still nothing. His throat tightened. He thought of Silas in the snow market. He thought of the $12 receipt. He thought of Elias saying kindness did not pay bills, as if the world could be measured only in numbers large enough to frighten people. He rubbed again. A twitch. So small he almost imagined it. Then a weak gasp. Then a sound no larger than a pinhole in the dark. The puppy squeaked. Caleb bowed his head. He did not sob. He did not shout. The relief moved through him too deep for noise. His forehead nearly touched the towel, and for one strange second he felt as though the cabin had become a chapel, and the altar was a newborn creature no bigger than his hand. "He's breathing," Caleb said. Lila exhaled hard through the phone. "Good. Put him with Mara. Keep watching." Caleb returned the pup to Mara. She cleaned it again, then tucked it against her body with the others. Her eyes lifted to Caleb. This time she did not look away. The fifth came at 1:18. The sixth at 2:07. By then, Caleb was operating on a kind of exhausted clarity. He recorded times, replaced towels, checked warmth, counted pups twice, then again because his tired mind did not trust arithmetic. Lila stayed on the phone until she was certain there were no immediate warning signs. Her voice had gone hoarse, but she did not complain. "You did well," she said near 3 in the morning. "Mara did it." "Yes," Lila said. "She did, and you didn't make it harder. That counts for a lot." Caleb looked at the nest. 6 puppies pressed against Mara, damp fur drying in the stove heat, small bodies kneading blindly toward milk and warmth. They were not symbols yet, not miracles packaged for human understanding. They were hungry, fragile, demanding little lives, each one fighting the enormous battle of continuing to breathe. Mara lay around them like a crescent moon around embers. Caleb sat back on his heels. His whole body ached, his shoulder pulsed, his knees felt packed with gravel. There was birth fluid on his sleeve, towels everywhere, notes scrawled across the slate board, and a bowl overturned near the stove. The cabin was a mess, a real mess, not neglect, not chaos. Life? He almost laughed. It came out broken and quiet, but it was laughter. Mara's eyes opened at the sound. "Sorry," he said. "Place has gone downhill." Her tired ear tilted outward. He took that as agreement. Before dawn, the storm began to loosen its grip. The wind still moved through the pines, but less like a beast now, more like something tired of its own anger. Snow lay high against the porch, nearly level with the first step. The windows glowed faint blue around the edges. Caleb changed the last damp towel he could reach without disturbing Mara too much. He checked each pup again. 1 dark-backed male, 1 tan female with a black muzzle, 1 tiny fighter who had nearly stayed silent, 3 others squirming with blind insistence. He did not name them. Names felt like promises, added to promises. Not yet. He lowered himself to the floor beside the nest, back against the wall, phone dead now from the long call, hands smelling of soap, milk, warm cloth, and the iron edge of birth. Mara watched him. For once her gaze held no calculation, only exhaustion, and something quieter. Caleb rested his hand on the floor, palm up, not reaching. Minutes passed. The stove breathed. The puppies made small, searching sounds. Then Mara shifted with painful care, stretched her neck, and placed her muzzle across Caleb's hand. Not on his boot this time, not near him, on him. The weight was light. Trust, Caleb realized, did not always arrive like a door opening. Sometimes it arrived as a tired mother laying her head on the hand of a man who had stayed through the hardest hour. Caleb looked at the 6 newborn lives curled against her belly. He had thought at the market that he was taking Mara away from the cold. Now he understood the promise differently. He had not saved her in a single noble gesture. He had merely been admitted to the first night of the work. And the work would begin again with mourning. For 2 days after the birth, Caleb Mercer did not leave the cabin except to bring in firewood and clear a narrow path from the porch to the truck. The storm had passed, but it had left the world remade. Snow lay high against the cabin walls, blue in the morning and silver by dusk. The pines stood heavy and still, as if ashamed of how loudly they had fought the wind. Every sound inside the cabin seemed larger now, the stove ticking, the scrape of Caleb's boots, the soft nursing sounds of 6 newborn pups pressed against Mara's belly. The cabin no longer belonged to silence. It belonged to breath. Mara recovered slowly. She ate in small meals, exactly as Lila instructed. She drank more when Caleb held the bowl near her head, though she still gave him a look that suggested gratitude was a private matter and none of his business. The puppies slept, rooted, squeaked, and wriggled with blind determination. The smallest one, the pup Caleb had rubbed back toward life in the heart of the storm, had a fierce habit of shoving his way beneath his siblings as if insulted by the idea of weakness. Caleb did not name any of them. Names were doors. He was not ready to open 6 more. Yet every time he checked the nest, counted the pups, and saw Mara watching him with tired amber eyes, another thought rose in him and would not settle. Silas should know. The old man should know Mara had made it through the storm. He should know there were 6 puppies, not 5, not 4, not a tragedy wrapped in towels beside the stove. He should know the dog he had loved enough to lose was still alive. Caleb told himself he had done his part. He had taken Mara in. He had kept her warm. He had stayed through the birth. He had followed the list, signed the paper, refused Elias Voss, and turned his clean, empty house into a nursery that smelled of milk, smoke, wet towels, and the holy disorder of new life. That should have been enough. But on the 3rd morning, while searching Nora's basket for a clean cloth, Caleb found the small piece of carved wood Silas had left behind. It must have been tucked under the towels from the market. Caleb turned it over in his palm. The carving was rough not because the hand lacked skill, but because the wood had been worked in cold weather by tired fingers. It showed a shepherd lying beneath a sky of uneven dots. Not 6 exactly. More like the suggestion of stars, as if the carver had begun counting and then lost the courage to finish. Mara saw it before Caleb spoke. Her head lifted from the nest. The puppies kneaded blindly against her belly. She did not rise. She was too tired for that, and too bound by the small warm kingdom at her side. But her eyes fixed on the wood. Her ears changed, one standing, one leaning outward. Then she made a sound, not a bark, not even a whine, a low, broken breath. Caleb had heard dogs make many sounds in his life. Warning, hunger, pain, complaint, confusion. But this was something quieter than all of those. It was recognition with nowhere to go. He looked at the carving again. "You miss him," he said. Mara lowered her head, but her eyes remained open. The answer sat in the room between them. Caleb placed the carving on the table beside the $12 receipt and Lila's notes. For several minutes he stood there, one hand flat on the wood grain, listening to the pups. A man could keep a dog alive and still fail the promise. That realization annoyed him first. Then it shamed him. By noon, he called Nora. She answered over the noise of a mixer. "If this is about the towels, I refuse to apologize for quality charity." "It's about Silas." The mixer stopped. When Nora spoke again, her voice had lost its bakery brightness. "You heard from him?" "No." A pause. "Oh." Caleb looked toward Mara. Where would he go? Nora was quiet long enough that Caleb could hear the shop bell ring faintly through the phone. Silas used to go places where things were broken. That's not an address. No, but it is a map if you knew him. She sighed. He repaired half the stalls in the market years ago. Fixed my old rolling pin once, though I told him a rolling pin isn't supposed to have a personality. He said everything made by hand has a personality, and mine had suffered under poor leadership. Caleb almost smiled. Nora? Right. Sorry. Her voice softened. There's the greenhouse by the rail spur, the old one with the cracked panes. He patched the door last winter. Wade chased him off twice and then pretended not to see him the third time. And sometimes he slept near the bus stop by Kerrigan's garage when the heaters were working. Anyone checked hospitals? I don't know. I will. Caleb, Nora said before he could hang up. What? He didn't give Mara to you because he didn't love her. I know. No, she said, firmer now. Know it properly. That old man looked like someone cutting out his own heart with a dull spoon when he handed you that leash. Caleb said nothing. Nora let the silence sit a moment, then added, And before you get heroic and stupid, make sure someone watches Mara. I'm not heroic. The second half remains under review. After the call, Caleb contacted Deputy Marin Cole. Marin did not waste questions. She listened, asked for the last confirmed time anyone saw Silas, and said she would check the hospital, warming room records, bus station log, and sheriff's notes. Her voice had its usual dry steadiness, but Caleb heard concern beneath it, wrapped tight like a knife in cloth. Can you leave the cabin if needed? She asked. Not with Mara and the pups alone? I can come up for a few hours when the road is passable. Lila needs to check Mara, too. I'll coordinate. The word struck Caleb strangely. Coordinate. For years he had coordinated operations, supplies, evacuation points, radio windows. But he had rarely coordinated need. Need had always felt like weakness when it was his own. Now he found himself saying, Thank you. Marin did not make a ceremony of it. Don't get used to it. I have a reputation. That afternoon, Lila arrived in her mud-splashed veterinary SUV, carrying fresh supplies and wearing the expression of someone who would scold snowdrifts if they blocked medical care. She checked Mara carefully, praised the mother, weighed the pups with a kitchen scale Caleb had cleaned 3 times, and frowned at the smallest one before nodding. He's a fighter. I noticed. Watch that he nurses enough. You may need to help him find a place if the others push him off. Caleb nodded, already reaching for the slate board. Lila glanced at the notes covering it and raised an eyebrow. I see the nursery has a command center. It works. I didn't say it didn't. She set down her bag. Marin called. She can stay with Mara this evening if I check them first. Roads are rough, but passable to town. Caleb looked toward the nest. Mara had allowed Lila closer this time, though she kept one paw curved protectively around the pups. Her eyes moved to Caleb, then to the carved wood on the table. Again that low breath. Lila followed the sound. What is that? Caleb handed her the carving. Lila turned it over, her thumb passing gently over the uneven stars. Silas made this? I think so. He used to carve little horses for the clinic donation jar, Lila said. Never signed them, pretended they appeared by divine rodent intervention. Caleb looked at her. That was his phrase, she said. Not mine. By late afternoon, Deputy Marin Cole stood in Caleb's cabin with her uniform jacket unzipped, a thermos in one hand and a notepad in the other. Mara watched her from the nest, but did not growl. Marin did not approach. She simply sat in Caleb's single chair as if accepting that in this house, even sitting was an act of negotiation. I checked County Hospital, Marin said. No Silas, no arrest records. Bus driver remembers seeing him near the North Stop yesterday morning, but didn't see him board. Kerrigan's garage says he came in to warm up, bought coffee with coins, left before noon. Which direction? North. Caleb felt the map unfold in his mind. Truck stop. Maybe, but check the greenhouse first. It's closer, and Wade confirmed Silas used it before. Wade confirmed? Marin's mouth twitched. After making several speeches about liability. Caleb put on his canvas jacket, then hesitated by the door. It was a small hesitation, but not a small thing. Mara, the pups, the stove, the list, the fragile order of the cabin, all of it remained behind him. Leaving felt wrong. Staying felt worse. Marin saw the conflict and did not soften it. They'll be fine for a few hours, she said. I know how to follow instructions. I even read them without underlining threats to myself. Caleb glanced at the slate board. Do not be stupid. No back door. Feed Mara, 6:30. Help small pup nurse. He took a breath. Call me if anything changes. I was planning to communicate by smoke signal, but all right. Lila would have laughed. Caleb only nodded. Before he left, he walked to the nest and crouched near Mara. He did not touch the pups. He did not crowd her. He only held the carved wood low enough for her to smell. I'm going to look, he said. Mara's eyes moved from the carving to his face. She gave no command, no magical sign, no sudden leap toward the door. Only that same tired, grieving breath. It was enough to make the choice feel less like an errand and more like an answer. The greenhouse stood beyond the old rail spur, where weeds had once swallowed the track before winter laid everything flat and white. Caleb parked by the road and walked the last 100 yards through snow that reached halfway up his boots. The structure leaned under its own history. Glass panes were cracked or missing. Frost feathered the remaining ones. The door hung unevenly, patched with a strip of cedar that had been planed smooth by careful hands. Silas's hands, Caleb thought. Inside, the air was colder than he expected, but still calmer than the wind outside. Dead vines clung to wires overhead. Empty trays sat stacked beneath a bench. In one corner, beside a rusted barrel stove that had not been used in days, Caleb found a folded blanket. He knew before he touched it, not because of evidence, not because he was tracking a target, because the place felt recently lonely. The blanket smelled faintly of wood smoke, damp wool, and dog. Mara had not found this. Caleb had. Through phone calls, questions, reluctant witnesses, and the dull work of caring enough to follow a human trail. That mattered. He crouched and saw wood shavings scattered near the wall. On the bench lay 3 tiny carvings, a horse with one unfinished leg, a crooked star, and a small dog curled around nothing. Caleb picked up the star. It was rougher than the piece at his cabin. Rushed. His throat tightened. For years he had believed disappearance was a kind of privacy. A man could withdraw, reduce his needs, become less troublesome to the living. He had called it discipline. He had called it peace. Standing in the abandoned greenhouse, looking at the blanket and the unfinished carvings, Caleb saw the lie more clearly than he wanted to. Sometimes vanishing was not strength. Sometimes it was the last language of someone who no longer believed he was worth finding. His phone buzzed. Marin? Greenhouse? She texted. Was here. Not now. A reply came quickly. Truck stop north is most likely. Want backup? Caleb looked around the glass house. Snow whispered through a cracked pane and dusted the bench like ash. No, he typed. Stay with Mara. Then, after a pause, he added, Thank you. This time the words did not feel like surrender. They felt like a rope tied properly. By the time Caleb reached the north truck stop, evening had turned the sky the color of bruised steel. The sign above the fuel pumps glowed blue and red through falling snow. Trucks idled in long rows, their engines rumbling like sleeping beasts. Light spilled from the diner windows onto slush and tire tracks. Caleb sat in his truck for a moment before going in. His shoulder ached, his boots were wet. In his pocket, the rough wooden star pressed against his thigh. He looked through the windshield at the doorway, where tired men came and went with coffee, cigarettes, and the careful faces of those who had nowhere better to be. Once Caleb would have turned around. He would have told himself he had done enough. Now he opened the door and stepped into the cold. The bell above the truck stop entrance rang as he entered, thin and metallic beneath the hum of fluorescent lights. Inside, the air smelled of burnt coffee, diesel, fried potatoes, and wet wool. A few drivers sat at the counter. A cashier watched a small television with the volume low. Near the far wall, beyond the vending machines and the rack of road maps nobody bought anymore, a row of plastic chairs sat under a heater vent. Caleb's eyes moved there first. One chair was empty. Beside it, on the floor, lay a few pale curls of fresh wood shaving. Caleb stopped. The world did not offer him Silas yet, only the trace of him, a small sign that the man had passed through here and might still be close enough to find. Caleb reached into his pocket and closed his fingers around the carved star. Outside, snow fell against the windows. Inside, among strangers and fluorescent light, Caleb Mercer understood that the promise had grown legs. It had walked down from his cabin, through a broken greenhouse, across a frozen rail spur, and into this lonely truck stop. He was no longer only the man who had taken in a pregnant dog. He was the man learning how to search for someone the town had practiced not seeing. Silas Boone was sitting beneath the heater vent at the north truck stop, trying to disappear in plain sight. He had chosen the farthest plastic chair from the counter, the one beside the vending machines and the rack of road maps no one touched anymore. His patched coat was buttoned wrong. Snowmelt darkened the cuffs of his pants. His wool cap sat low over his ears, and in his lap lay a half-finished carving of a dog curled around an empty space. At first, Caleb almost walked past him, not because Silas was hidden well, but because the world had trained the eye to slide away from certain kinds of sorrow. Then Silas coughed. It was a small, dry, stubborn sound, the cough of a man trying to remain polite while his body betrayed him. Caleb stopped. Silas looked up. For a moment, neither man spoke. Around them, the truck stop lived its tired evening life. Coffee pouring into paper cups, fry oil hissing behind the counter, diesel engines rumbling outside like old beasts sleeping in the snow. Silas's face changed first. Shame moved over it, quick and painful. "If you came to tell me she died," he said, "say it standing there. Don't sit down and make it kind." Caleb felt the words enter him slowly. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. Nora had sent the picture an hour earlier after Marin helped her take it at the cabin. Mara lay near the stove, exhausted but alive, her body curved around 6 nursing puppies. The firelight touched the pale drop of fur on her chest. One tiny pup had crawled onto her foreleg as if claiming a mountain. Caleb handed the phone to Silas. The old man stared at the screen. His mouth opened, but no sound came. Then his hand began to shake so badly, Caleb had to steady the phone from beneath. "All 6, Caleb said. Silas touched the screen with one cracked fingertip, not pressing hard enough to blur the image. "She did it?" "She did." "And Mara?" "Tired, eating, meaner than she looks." Silas made a sound that might have been laughter if it had not broken in the middle. His shoulders folded inward. He lowered his head over the phone, and tears fell onto the glass. Nobody at the counter turned around. Maybe they were being kind. Maybe they had learned not to see. Caleb sat in the chair beside him, leaving one empty seat between them. He had learned, somewhere between Mara's first growl and the first puppy's breath, that closeness could be a pressure if offered too quickly. Silas wiped his face with his sleeve. "I didn't sell her because I stopped loving her." "I know." "No, you don't?" Silas's voice was hoarse. "People like me don't get believed much. Once your coat looks bad enough, every choice you make gets translated into failure." Caleb looked at the unfinished carving in Silas's lap. "Then translate it for me." Silas's fingers tightened around the little dog shape. "My wife, Ada, used to say Mara had the soul of a church bell, loud when she needed to be, quiet when folks needed reverence." His eyes stayed on the phone. "After Ada died, that dog kept me waking up. Then the house went, then the shop. Then Winter started asking questions I had no answer for." He swallowed. "When I knew she was carrying pups, I thought maybe God had a cruel sense of humor, giving life to a man who couldn't keep a roof." Caleb did not offer comfort. Some confessions were like splinters. Pulling too fast only tore more flesh. Silas handed the phone back. "I can't go up there." To the cabin? To Mara. He shook his head. She'll smell me and remember hunger, cold, hiding behind stalls, me telling her just one more night when I knew I was lying. And those pups. His voice thinned. What kind of man looks at 6 new lives and knows he has nothing to give them? Caleb thought of his cabin before Mara. 1 chair, 1 bed, a house prepared for siege, not life. Maybe the kind who gave away the last thing he loved so they could live. Silas closed his eyes. The heater above them rattled, pushing down warm air that smelled faintly of dust. Outside, snow blew sideways through the fuel station lights. Caleb could have pressed harder. He could have said Mara needed him, that the pups were proof of mercy, that shame was useless. All true, all too heavy for a man already bent under the weight of truth. So he said only, "Come back to town, not the cabin, not yet, just town." Silas looked at him with suspicion born of too many offers that had hidden hooks. Why? Because it's cold? That's all? That's enough. For a long moment Silas studied him. Then he nodded once. Caleb bought him coffee and a bowl of soup from the counter. Silas tried to refuse both. Caleb placed them on the table and said nothing. Eventually, hunger defeated pride by a narrow margin. They drove back through the snow without much conversation. Silas slept for 12 minutes, woke in panic, then apologized for sleeping. Caleb told him not to do it again unless he meant to snore properly. Silas gave him a sideways look. That a joke? Attempt? Needs sanding. By the time they reached White Pine Valley, the temperature had dropped hard enough to silver the truck windows at the edges. The town looked smaller under the cold, its lights huddled close around the market square. Deputy Marin Cole was waiting outside Bell's Bakery, arms folded, breath white in the air. Nora stood behind the window with 2 paper bags clutched to her chest like she had been personally assigned by heaven to feed every wounded creature within county limits. Marin opened Silas's door before Caleb could. "Mr. Boone," she said, "you look terrible." Silas blinked. Marin added, "That's an observation, not a charge." Nora pushed through the bakery door. "I have soup, biscuits, and a blanket. If anyone argues, I will become unpleasant." "You're already unpleasant," Silas muttered. Nora's face lit with relief. "There he is." They did not take Silas to Caleb's cabin. Caleb did not offer, and Silas did not ask. Instead, Nora seated him in the bakery storage room near the oven, where flour sacks lined one wall and the air smelled of yeast, cinnamon, and human stubbornness. Silas sat wrapped in a blanket, drinking soup with both hands around the bowl. Marin stood near the doorway, speaking quietly into her phone. When she ended the call, her face had changed. "Cold advisory just upgraded," she said. "Wind chill drops dangerous after midnight. I know of at least 4 people sleeping in vehicles near the rail spur and 2 behind Kerrigan's garage." Nora looked toward the frosted window. Church basement. Full and no pets. Silas flinched at that. Caleb noticed. Wade Kessler arrived 10 minutes later, jangling his huge ring of keys and wearing the expression of a man summoned to a meeting where everyone planned to ask him for the one thing he did not want to give. "No," he said before anyone spoke. Nora pointed a wooden spoon at him. "You don't even know the question." "I know your face. That is the face of a woman about to make my insurance agent hate me." Marin said, "The storehouse behind the market has heat." "Barely." "It has walls. Expensive ones. It has a bathroom if the water line isn't frozen." Wade looked offended by accuracy. "Sometimes?" Nora stepped closer. "People are outside, Wade." "People are always outside," he snapped, then regretted it. His jaw worked beneath his neat mustache. "I'm not heartless. I'm responsible. Fire code, liability, access, who supervises, Who cleans? What happens if somebody brings in a dog that bites? What happens if a space heater tips over? What happens when a good idea burns down 3 stalls and I get sued by ghosts of vendors past? The room fell quiet. For once, nobody mocked him, because Wade was not entirely wrong. That was the curse of practical men. Sometimes their fear had facts inside it. Caleb set his coffee down. "Show me the storehouse." Wade stared. "What?" "Show me." The storehouse sat behind the market, a long wooden building once used for overflow feed, folding tables, broken signage, and holiday decorations too ugly to display but too expensive to throw out. Snow had drifted high against the back wall. Wade unlocked the door with 3 different keys, muttering about fools, weather, and municipal paperwork. Inside, the air was cold but not deadly. A wall heater rattled near the office corner. The overhead lights flickered before staying on. Stacks of crates, old stall frames, extension cords, folded tents, and forgotten Christmas garland filled the space. Caleb stood just inside the door and looked. Not as a dreamer, as a man building a position. 2 exits, he said. Front and side, clear both. No sleeping near the heater. Fire extinguisher there. Expired. Need 2 more. Electrical cords off the floor. No open flames. Pet area in that corner, separated by tables and crates. Blankets here, coffee and soup near the front. Sign-in sheet. 1 person awake at all times. Wade stared at him. Marin had already taken out her metal pen. Nora whispered to Silas, "He's terrifying when useful." Silas, leaning against the doorway with the blanket still around his shoulders, looked at the cracked boards along the north wall. "Wind comes through there." Caleb turned to him. Silas looked embarrassed to have spoken. Then he pointed with the unfinished carving still in his hand. "And there, lower seam, mice chewed it years back." Wade frowned. "How would you know?" Silas gave him a tired look. "Because I fixed the south wall in 2018 after your cousin backed a truck into it, and you blamed hail." Nora made a strangled sound of delight. Wade's face reddened. "That is not how I remember it." "That is how Wood remembers it," Silas said. Something shifted then. Not everything. Not forgiveness. Not solution. But the old man who had been found under a truck stop heater was no longer only someone needing rescue. His eyes sharpened as he crossed the storehouse, fingers brushing the warped boards. He named the weak places, not dramatically, simply, like a priest remembering the cracks in an old chapel. Caleb saw Wade watching him, saw the discomfort there. Wade had wanted Silas to remain a problem. Problems could be moved, sighted, locked out. But a man who knew where the wind entered your building was harder to dismiss. For the next 3 hours, the storehouse changed by inches. Marin checked minimum safety requirements and called dispatch to log the temporary warming room. Nora recruited 2 volunteers from the bakery line and returned with soup, bread, coffee, and more opinions than anyone had requested. Lila arrived after checking Mara and the pups at the cabin, carrying a box marked "Pet Supplies" in thick black marker. "Mara is stable," she told Caleb quietly. "Pups are nursing. The little one needed help, but he's stubborn." Caleb exhaled. He had not realized he was holding the breath. "Thank you." Lila studied his face. "You're getting dangerously good at saying that. Don't spread it around." Across the room, Silas worked seated on an overturned crate, too weak to stand long, but unwilling to be idle. He patched gaps with scrap wood, his hands steadier around tools than around soup. Caleb cut boards to size. Wade found screws. Nora sorted blankets. Marin taped handwritten rules near the entrance. No alcohol, no open flames. Pets stay in pet corner unless leashed. Respect the room or lose the room. Coffee is not a constitutional right, but Nora says it should be. Caleb suspected the last line had not been Marin's. The first people arrived after 9. A man from the rail spur with frost in his beard and a mutt tucked inside his coat. A woman who lived in her sedan behind Kerrigan's garage, carrying an orange cat in a laundry basket. 2 older men who smelled of diesel and cold wool, neither speaking much. They entered with the wary humility of people used to being treated as inconvenience. Silas did not greet them like guests. He greeted them like a carpenter assessing load-bearing beams. "Dog corner there," he said. "Cat higher up, away from the mutt. Don't put wet socks by the heater unless you want everyone to hate your ancestors." The man with the mutt blinked, then laughed. The room warmed by degrees. Not just with heat, with permission. Near 10, Elias Voss appeared in the doorway. His black coat was clean. His gloves were black leather. Snow had not humbled him. He looked across the blankets, the soup table, the pet corner, the taped rules, the half-repaired wall, and Silas holding a hammer like a man returned to his own name. "Well," Elias said, "a dog gives birth, and suddenly the town discovers morality." Nora turned with a ladle in her hand. "Careful, Elias. This soup is hot and my aim has improved." Elias smiled faintly. "I only mean its impressive branding, a pregnant shepherd, a lonely veteran, a homeless craftsman, very moving, very marketable." Caleb felt the old anger rise, clean and tempting. He did not take it. Instead, he looked around the storehouse, at Marin checking the sign-in sheet, at Lila examining the mutt's cracked paw pads, at Wade pretending not to care while adjusting the heater, at Silas showing a man how to place wet boots on cardboard instead of directly on the floor, at Nora handing soup to a woman who was trying not to cry into it. Caleb turned back to Elias. "No one's buying anything tonight." Elias's expression cooled. "That must be new for you," Nora added. Wade made a noise that might have been a cough or the birth of courage. Elias looked at Wade. "You approve this?" Wade's keys clinked at his belt. For a second, the old Wade returned, worried about papers, costs, blame, doors left open. Then he looked at Silas's patch on the wall, looked at the people holding soup, looked at the cat watching everyone like a displeased monarch from its laundry basket. "For tonight," Wade said, "with supervision, limited capacity, no nonsense." Marin nodded. "Documented?" Wade straightened, as if the word documented gave compassion a spine. "And if anybody burns anything, I'm haunting all of you." Elias shut his folder. There was no defeat grand enough for music, no secret exposed, no crowd turning on him. He simply found himself standing in a room where his language had lost power. No one was discussing price, breeding value, or ownership. They were discussing where to put more blankets. Elias left without another word. Outside, the cold pressed against the storehouse walls. Inside, the first temporary warming room behind the White Pine Winter Market held. Not perfectly. The coffee ran out once. The heater complained. One of the old men snored like a chainsaw drowning in gravel. The orange cat escaped its basket and occupied Wade's folded coat with imperial certainty. Nora laughed so hard she had to sit down. But no one froze. No one was turned away for having a dog. Near midnight, Silas sat beside the patched wall, exhausted, hammer resting across his knees. Caleb brought him coffee. Silas looked at the cup. "You keep feeding me, I'll have to start being grateful." "Wouldn't want that." "No," Silas took the cup. "Dangerous habit." They sat without speaking. Across the room, the mutt slept with its head on its owner's boot. The woman's orange cat purred inside Wade's coat. Marin stood by the door, awake and watchful. Lila wrote notes on a clipboard. Nora wrapped leftover biscuits in napkins for morning. Wade moved to the light switch near the storage office, paused, and looked at the room as if seeing the building for the first time without measuring only risk. Then he took the biggest key from his ring and hung it on a nail by the door. "For supervised nights," he said gruffly. "Don't make me regret being human." Nora's eyes softened. Marin wrote something down. Silas looked at the key as if it were a bell being rung after years of silence. Caleb looked at it too. A key was a small thing, metal, teeth, a way to close. But tonight, hanging there on a nail in a storehouse patched by an old man's hands, it had become something else. A permission, a beginning, not a miracle, not redemption tied in a bow. Only the first agreement between mercy and the real world. And in winter, Caleb was learning, that was no small fire. The winter did not end just because one door had opened. White Pine Valley remained cold in the way mountain towns know how to be cold, honestly, stubbornly, without apology. Snow still pressed against fence rails. Wind still scraped its knuckles along the storehouse walls behind the market. Trucks still needed chains, pipes still threatened to freeze, and Wade Kessler still complained loudly enough for 3 counties whenever someone tracked slush across his floor. But something had changed. Not loudly. That was the important part. The storehouse behind the market did not become a grand shelter overnight. No banner appeared across Main Street. No reporter came with a camera. No one stood at a podium and gave the kind of speech that made hard work sound cleaner than it was. Instead, Deputy Marin Cole taped a printed schedule to the door. Warming room. Open during severe cold advisories, supervised hours. Only pets allowed in designated area, respect the room or lose the room. Nora Bell added, in smaller handwriting beneath it, "Coffee is emotional infrastructure." Marin crossed that out. Nora wrote it again. By the 3rd night, Marin stopped crossing it out. They called it the 6 Stars Room because Silas Boone carved the sign himself from a scrap of cedar pulled out of Wade's junk pile. The letters were uneven, but strong. Above them, Silas carved a shepherd curled protectively beneath 6 small stars. He did not explain the stars to everyone who asked. Sometimes he only touched the edge of the sign with his thumb and said, "They were born warm." That's enough. For a man who had once tried to vanish under a truck stop heater, Silas became surprisingly hard to remove from the storehouse. He fixed the draft near the north wall, then the sticking side door, then a cracked shelf, then a row of makeshift pet cubbies from old market crates and clean scrap wood. He worked sitting down when his cough got bad, one hand holding a tool, the other pressed to his ribs. Nora threatened to tie him to a chair if he did not rest. Silas told her he had been threatened by better women. Nora said she doubted that very much. The first week, people came in cautiously, as if warmth might be taken away if they accepted too much of it. A woman who lived in her sedan brought an orange cat that hated everyone except Dr. Lila Hart. A retired truck mechanic came with an old mutt whose paws were cracked from ice. 2 men from the rail spur slept sitting up against the wall, boots on, hands folded over paper cups of coffee as though someone might ask them to pay for it later. No one asked. Wade pretended to monitor the room only for liability reasons. Yet every night he checked the heater twice, refilled the paper towel dispenser, and grumbled if the coffee ran low. "People get dramatic without coffee," he muttered. Nora looked at him over a tray of biscuits. That sounded dangerously close to compassion. "It's crowd control." "Of course." Caleb Mercer watched all of it, with the wary unease of a man seeing a life expand around him without permission. He helped where help made sense. He cleared snow from the storehouse exits. He repaired a loose handrail. He drove Lila's supply boxes from the clinic to the market. He made sure the pet corner stayed clean and that no extension cord crossed a walkway. He did not lead meetings. He did not make speeches. If Nora told anyone he was the reason the whole thing worked, Caleb immediately found something heavy to carry in another room. But he kept showing up. That, in White Pine Valley, began to count as a kind of speech. Up at the cabin, Mara healed the way wounded mothers heal, unevenly, fiercely, and with very little concern for anyone's preferred timeline. She ate better. Her coat slowly regained some of its shine. The pale drop of fur on her chest grew cleaner and brighter against the black and tan of her body. She still stiffened if a truck came too fast up the road. She still placed herself between strangers and the pups. But she slept more deeply now, sometimes with her head on Caleb's boot, sometimes with her muzzle resting near the walnut-handled knife on the floor beside his chair, as if she understood that tools could mean safety in the right hands. The 6 puppies grew like weather. At first they were only blind warmth, soft bodies pressed against Mara's belly. Then their eyes opened, cloudy and astonished. Then they discovered legs, though not always in the correct order. Soon Caleb's clean cabin became a battlefield of soft paws, rolled towels, stolen socks, and tiny growls aimed at enemies such as chair legs, dust motes, and one another. The smallest pup, the one who had nearly stayed silent on the night of the storm, proved to be the loudest. He was dark-backed with tan eyebrows and a white fleck under his chin that made him look perpetually accused of something. He followed Caleb with grave devotion until distracted by his own tail, which seemed to offend him on a spiritual level. Lila called him the Little General. Caleb refused to name him. "You named him by refusing to name him," Lila said during one checkup, weighing the pup in a towel-lined bowl. "No, I didn't." "You look at him differently." "I look at all of them." "Sure. But with him, your face does that thing." "What thing?" "The thing where you pretend not to have a heart because it would complicate your schedule." Nora, who had come along with a fresh basket of towels she claimed were just passing through, said, "That is absolutely a thing." Caleb took the pup from the bowl and placed him carefully beside Mara. "Both of you are banned from my cabin." "Again?" Nora asked. "Should I keep a calendar?" Silas did not come to the cabin immediately. Caleb offered once, only once. Silas looked toward the mountain road, then down at his hands and shook his head. Not yet. Caleb understood. There were reunions people imagined as healing because they had never stood inside shame. Silas had given Mara away because he loved her. That did not mean seeing her safe would be simple. Love and guilt often wore each other's coats. So Caleb brought pieces of Mara's life to Silas instead. A photograph of the pups sleeping in a pile. A short video of Mara licking the smallest one back into line after he attempted to climb into the water bowl. A little scrap of blanket that smelled like milk and warm fur, which Silas held for a long time without speaking. Then, one clear morning, Silas asked, "Does she look for me?" Caleb considered lying gently. He did not. "Sometimes." Silas closed his eyes. Caleb waited. Finally, Silas nodded. "Then I ought to stop being a coward before she thinks I died badly." The first visit happened on a pale Sunday afternoon when the snow had softened into glittering crust and the whole valley seemed to be holding its breath. Silas came in Marin's county vehicle because Nora said his first meeting with Mara should not involve him climbing into Caleb's truck like a sack of regret. Marin parked by the porch and helped him out without making a show of helping. Caleb stood near the door. Inside, Mara lifted her head. She smelled him before she saw him. Her body went still. Not fear, not warning. Recognition. Silas stopped at the threshold. His old cap trembled in his hands. For a moment he looked smaller than he had at the market, stripped of even the dignity of making a choice. His eyes went to Mara, then to the pups, then away, as if the sight was too much light after a long tunnel. "Mara," he whispered. The dog rose. Slowly, because nursing had tired her and healing had not finished its work. The puppies protested, tumbling against one another as their warm wall moved away. Caleb stood ready, not to interfere, only to keep the moment from breaking if it became too heavy. Mara crossed the room. At first, Caleb thought she would stop short. She did not. She walked straight to Silas and pressed her head against his knees. The sound the old man made was not quite a sob. It was more like a door in him opening after years of being swollen shut. He sank carefully onto the bench beside the door, and Mara rested her muzzle in his lap. "I'm sorry," Silas said into her fur. "I'm sorry, girl. I'm sorry I couldn't be your roof." Mara did not absolve him in any human way. She only stayed. Sometimes that was the older mercy. The puppies, offended by being left out of history, came wobbling over one by one. The smallest climbed onto Silas's boot and attempted to chew the lace with the seriousness of a judge reviewing evidence. Silas laughed through tears. Caleb looked away toward the window. Outside, snow slid from a pine branch and fell in a soft white hush. By the time the puppies were 8 weeks old, Lila had become terrifying. No one adopted a pup because it was cute. No one got one because German Shepherds looked impressive in photos. Lila required health checks, vaccination plans, home visits, fencing details, schedules, references, and what Nora called an emotional interrogation with medical footnotes. Caleb approved of every annoying step. He inspected homes with the grim seriousness of a man evaluating landing zones. One couple changed their mind after Caleb asked what they would do when a young shepherd chewed furniture out of anxiety. Another man laughed and said dogs should learn who was boss early. Caleb ended that interview so politely, Nora said it lowered the temperature of the room. 4 puppies found homes first. One went to a retired nurse named Gail Morrison, who lived near the South Ridge and had already built a warm corner in her mudroom before asking to meet the litter. She chose the calmest female, not because the pup was the prettiest, but because Mara relaxed when Gail sat down. Another went to a widowed rancher with arthritic hands and a fenced yard full of old tennis balls from shepherds long gone. 2 went together to a couple who ran the small library and promised solemnly that the dogs would never be asked to guard anything more dangerous than overdue books. The 5th stayed with Lila for observation. By the 3rd day, the pup had a blue sweater, 2 bowls, and a name tag. No one mentioned observation again. The smallest remained. There had never been a real discussion about that. He followed Caleb everywhere now, tripping over his paws, attacking bootlaces, falling asleep beneath the single chair that was no longer enough for the life inside the cabin. One evening, after the pup dragged Caleb's old glove into Mara's nest and curled around it, Silas looked at Caleb and said, "That one's yours. He's Mara's. She has chosen to share the burden." Caleb looked down at the pup. The little dog opened one eye, sneezed, and went back to sleep with his chin on the glove. Caleb named him Ember, because he had been the smallest heat in the largest storm, because he had almost gone out, because he had not. Mara stayed too. That mattered most. Caleb never spoke of keeping her. The word felt wrong. She was not a possession won by kindness. She was a mother who had survived winter, hunger, fear, and the terrible mercy of being handed from one wounded man to another. One afternoon, after the last adoption visit, Caleb opened the cabin door. Mara stepped onto the porch. Snow fell lightly over the trees. The road down to town lay open. For a long moment she stood with her nose lifted toward the valley. Ember tumbled around her feet, fighting a dead leaf. Caleb waited. Mara could have looked toward the road. She could have whined for Silas. She could have moved away from the house and reminded Caleb that love was not a contract. Instead, she turned back inside. Not quickly, not because she was called, because she chose. Caleb stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, and felt something in him loosen with a pain, almost like relief. That evening, Silas hung the finished 6 stars sign above the warming room door. Wade complained that the screws were crooked. Silas told him the building was crooked first. Nora cried and blamed the cold. Marin documented the room's updated capacity. Lila checked the mutt with cracked paws. Someone made coffee. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone slept without being asked to leave. The room was still temporary. The work was not. Later, Caleb returned to the cabin with Mara and Ember. The sky was clear, and moonlight lay across the snow like a blessing that did not require anyone to be worthy of it. Silas had carved one more small star and given it to Caleb without explanation. Caleb placed it on the shelf beside the $12 receipt, Lila's first instruction sheet, and the care agreement signed in Wade's reluctant hand. Paper and wood. Proof and promise. Mara settled near the stove. Ember climbed over Caleb's boot, failed to defeat it, and fell asleep across the laces. Caleb sat in his chair, still the only chair, though Nora had begun making threats about that, and listened. The cabin breathed around him, not quietly, not neatly. With the soft sigh of a mother dog, the tiny snore of a puppy, the stove's steady tick, the wind outside, and the distant knowledge that down in town, behind the winter market, a key hung on a nail beside a door that would open again when the cold came hard. Caleb looked at Mara. She opened one amber eye. "You know," he said, "this place used to be orderly." Mara closed her eye again, unimpressed by lost civilization. Ember kicked in his sleep and growled at some dream enemy no larger than a sock. Caleb smiled. He did not stop at this time. The winter had not ended. Loss had not been undone. Silas still carried grief. Mara still startled at sudden sounds. Caleb still woke some nights with his heart beating too fast and the old dark reaching for him. But now, when morning came, it did not arrive to find him alone. It arrived to find work waiting. Food bowls, firewood, a warming room schedule, a puppy with imperial opinions about bootlaces, an old man rediscovering the worth of his hands, a town learning, imperfectly, how to stop looking away. Compassion, Caleb understood then, was not the grand door opened once in a storm. It was keeping the hinge oiled afterward. It was making coffee again, washing blankets again, calling the vet again. Choosing the right home slowly, letting the wounded return at their own pace. And when the snow fell harder, it was remembering where the key hung. Outside, the moon silvered the porch, and new paw prints crossed the white boards where Mara had gone out and come back in. They were not the tracks of escape anymore. They were the marks of a home learning how to hold what had arrived at its door. Sometimes healing does not arrive as a grand miracle. Sometimes it comes as a tired dog choosing to trust again, an old man finding work for his hands, a locked door becoming a warm room, or one small promise kept through a long winter. This story reminds us that compassion is not only what we feel in a tender moment, it is what we continue to do after the moment has passed. A bowl refilled, a blanket folded, a door opened again, a life treated as worthy, even when the world has looked away. May we all notice the quiet souls around us who are waiting for a little warmth. And may God give us the courage to keep the hinge of mercy open. If this story touched your heart, please share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in stories of loyalty, healing, and small acts of grace, consider subscribing for more.